The FBI reportedly groomed a 16-year-old with brain development issues to become a terrorist, according to new Intercept reporting. The Department of Justice arrested now 18-year-old Mateo Ventura in Massachusetts last week on, quote, allegations of providing financial support to the Islamic State group, The Intercept reports. According to The Intercept, however, the only terrorist he's accused of being in contact with was an undercover FBI agent who befriended him online when he was just 16 years old. He solicited cash donations via gift cards and directed him not to tell anyone about their online relationship.
Ventura's family has reportedly denied allegations that their son was a terrorist and said he was manipulated by the FBI. Mateo's father, Paul Ventura, who is on the left of Mateo in this cell phone photo, told The Intercept, quote, he was born prematurely, he had brain development issues, I had the school do a neurosurgery evaluation on him and they said his brain was underdeveloped. He was suffering endless bullying at school with other kids taking food off his plate, tripping him in the hallway, humiliating him, laughing at him. Intercept reporter Murtaza Hussain joins us now to discuss this story. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So this is not the first time this has happened by a long stretch. The FBI has a well-documented history by you and other reporters of engaging in what some have described as a kind of entrapment, connecting with lonely people on social media and inducing them to commit to crimes that they were utterly unlikely or incapable of doing on their own. What is the state of this case right now? He's been arrested. Is the FBI putting up the mission accomplished banner that we've caught a dangerous terrorist, et cetera?
Well, yeah, they actually did put up the mission accomplished banner in the form of a press release immediately after the arrest, which really highlighted the case as a seeming victory against terrorist financing or uncovering of a dangerous possible ISIS fighter or other type of terrorist in the United States. And that initially was also the narrative that a lot of local and regional news outlets which covered the case did, which is quite typical. The FBI press release or DOJ press release following these arrests often drives most of the news coverage thereafter. But I find covering these issues for about a decade now, there's very, very often more to the story than initially being proclaimed in these sort of official communications. And this case, I think, of all the cases I've covered over the years, stands out for being particularly egregious for a number of reasons. Rob, you mentioned that, and Bree mentioned that this young man was very young. He was 16 years old when it started. He had a history of developmental deficiencies that sort of would make it harder for him to do something like what he's being accused of. But also, very, very interestingly and importantly, in the course of this investigation, which went for 2 years, Mateo Ventura actually, towards the end, tried reporting the FBI's own informant to the FBI. He tried calling it several times to say, hey, I have information about terrorist recruitment. I'd like to give this information to you in exchange for some sort of reciprocal agreement. And that's actually how the investigation almost came to an end. Not long after, maybe about a month after he started calling the FBI and trying to report this informant who was their own employee, FBI undercover employee, he was arrested by the FBI. So there are a lot of very, very troubling aspects of this case. And I'll add that also this is the government's own narrative. This is not even the defense narrative, which will probably raise other extenuating factors. The government's own narrative is that this is what they're doing for them for 2 years, and he even tried reporting themselves to the FBI. So I think that it shows that in many cases these investigations, these arrest announcements, they bear very, very little resemblance to what the narrative the government's going to put forth and what you can call these sort of mission accomplished press releases and public statements.
So how did they end up targeting Mateo in the first place? Are we to understand that the FBI is just trolling internet chat rooms for 16-year-old children who they can induce into believing that they're having a relationship with ISIS and to not tell their parents about it? I mean, why did they even drill down on Mateo of all the people on the internet in the first place?
So the FBI does engage in informant and undercover operations, both in the real world and online, quite extensively, focus on different communities and different ideological subgroups. In this case, they found someone online, they developed a relationship with them, a friendship with them over the course of a number of years. And when you're 16, even without developmental or neurological impairments like Mateo had, you can be quite impressionable, and you can want to impress someone online who's your friend. This FBI informant told Mateo, give him compliments about his physical appearance. He asked him to send him videos and photos of himself, complimenting him on his beard and saying things like that. Well, if you're a kid who's experiencing bullying in school, could be quite, could really get an emotional tie with you. So the FBI visited Mateo's house some time ago, maybe early in the investigation, and met his father, met him, and told him, hey, your son's doing things on the internet which you shouldn't be doing. You should keep an eye on that. And that's really an appropriate response, actually. But his father said that after that initial conversation, when the FBI connected Mateo with someone who they said was a counselor, he never heard from them again. He thought the issue had gone away. In reality, they continued talking to him for the 2 years. And then at the end of it, I think they'd have to know that he wasn't really a threat. He had no plan on his own to commit any act of violence. He was not in touch with anyone from ISIS that we know, other than the FBI's own employee. He declined several offers or attempts to try to travel abroad at the FBI's request to go join ISIS, which he didn't even know existed at that point. And still, when he turned 18, after investigating from age of 16, they arrested him. And I think that from my own perspective, looking at these cases, for cases like this for many, many years, I think there's institutional impetus to do that. The reason is, if you sink 2 years in investigating somebody, regardless who they are, if they're a threat or not, it's a lot of labor cost. It's a lot of resource devoted, and you feel a pressure to generate cases. And you're rewarded as an FBI agent for generating cases, for generating arrests, not for walking away from cases. You're rewarded with those big splashy headlines and press releases. So I think in this case, more could come out about this case at discovery and trial, but it seems very, very strongly it's one of those cases in which the FBI helped generate a case by grooming or otherwise encouraging a very vulnerable young man to break the law. In this case, by doing something very trivial, most people would say, by sending small amounts of gift cards to an FBI agent at their request.
You say they were trying to induce him to travel abroad. Did they have a specific plan for him or something, or an actual violent act they were trying to get him, or they were trying to persuade him to agree that he should travel to the Middle East to meet with an ISIS recruiter or something like that?
Well, there's so many things about this case which are so eyebrow-raising when you look at the government's complaint against Mateo Ventura. He didn't seem to know where ISIS was, because ISIS, a couple of years ago, in its main territories of Iraq and Syria, ceased to exist, more or less. So he had to kind of be guided that, hey, if you want to leave your country, if you want to leave the United States, you can go here, you can go to Egypt. He was asked to do this several times when he was 17 and 16 years old. And when he was 17, he actually came up with an excuse. This is by the FBI's own narrative. He said that, I can't join ISIS anymore. I hurt my leg. I fell, hurt my leg, and I can't join this group anymore. I'm sorry, I can't talk anymore. So he tried to get out of it. And later on, when they tried to help him book flights or encourage him to book flights to Egypt, he didn't show up for his flight. He didn't show up that day. He stayed home, and he started calling the FBI and trying to report what was going on. And you have to keep in mind that a lot of the communications between Mateo, the FBI, and the FBI informant are included in the court documents today. And they really speak to somebody who is not, intellectually fully developed. As a young person, but also somebody with, some of the issues his father talked about premature birth and the implications of that. He's trying to negotiate with the FBI, asking them for $10 million in duffel bags full of cash and immunity in exchange for reporting their own informant to them. He's, coming up with very childish or juvenile sort of excuses why he can't talk to the FBI anymore. And they're still insisting and talking to him and sort of, keeping the door open to that. So it's somebody who I think is very, very unlikely to have been able to pull off, any type of violent plot, which was not any specific plot mentioned at all in the allegations against him. Very unlikely to be able to travel on his own. He couldn't book flights because he didn't have a credit card, didn't have a passport, all things which the FBI encouraged him to get on his own. And, it seems like there's somebody who needed help, if anything, or need from his family or from law enforcement, whose family, to guide him away from online activities he's engaging with. Unfortunately, instead of getting that help, they kind of helped the moment came when they arrested him.
Well, what a just very disturbing case, obviously bad on its own and really an indictment of what the FBI's priorities are. We have a lot of criticisms of what the FBI chooses to focus on. To do this for 2 years is just is incredible. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
No problem.